Hey there, Grumpy Old Fart here. This is a compilation video of some of my greatest hits. Hope y'all enjoy them.
The name of this particular video is Why I Like Running Black Dragons in Underground Settings. And one of the things that that the person who runs the game is called a dungeon master, and the dungeon master runs all the bad guys and everybody in the game who's not player characters, including the monsters. And in Dungeons and Dragons, it says it right in the name, dragons. There's going to be dragons in Dungeons and Dragons. That's what it is. And over the course of my gaming career, I've been playing for over 40 years, and I have killed a lot of dragons in my time in the game, and I've run a lot of dragons against player characters, PCs, and none of them, in my opinion, none of them stack up to a black dragon. For those of you who don't know, there are different colors of dragons in Dungeons and Dragons. Your standard red dragon breathes fire. Everybody knows about that one. A blue dragon spits a lightning bolt. Green dragons exhale poison gas. Chlorine gas, I think it is. And there's a bunch of different kinds of dragons. But beyond all that, my favorite one is the black dragon. Especially if you're in an underground setting. Black dragons are extremely devastating because they spit acid. Yeah, they're a breath weapon. They don't breathe fire, they spit acid. The way it works in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is a dragon gets to breathe his breath weapon, whatever the breath weapon is, 3 times a day. And it does a lot of damage. Depending on how you run it, I think the book says it does damage equal to the hit points of the dragon. So if the dragon has 80 hit points, it's an 80 hit point breath weapon. So, in newer versions, they've changed it, but in AD&D, that's the way it worked. So, imagine the setting. There's a black dragon in an underground cavern, big underground temple, something. And a group of adventurers come in, and you got your big badass fighters. You got the wizard ready to cast some spells, and the thief are trying to get around back for the backstab, and the cleric ready to heal people. You know, and 8 or 10 players, whatever. First thing the dragon does is use its breath weapon. First thing. Why? Because it's the most effective attack that dragon has. So this dragon spits acid, and dragons, by the way, are huge. So when it spits this acid, that's a lot of spit. Regardless of the group, how many there are, or whether they make their saving throws, it doesn't matter. Because, and by the way, in the game, a savings throw allows you to take half damage from whatever the attack is. You can get savings throws versus different magic spells and things like that. You have a savings throw versus breath weapons. Well, even if they make their save, they only take half damage. Well, if it's a decent sized dragon, it doesn't matter. But even if they do make their saving throw, acid pools. So you've got the dragon standing here, and it spits acid, and now there's a pool of acid. In order to physically attack that dragon, you have to go through the acid. You have to stand in the acid to attack the dragon. You see what I'm saying? It's not a healthy work environment. Any fighters that have to get up there with their weapons, their swords or axes or whatever, to hack on this dragon, they're going to have a hell of a time of it. Excuse me. Sorry, still fighting a cold. At any rate, the wizards, standing back casting spells, that's all well and good. The problem is the dragon has 2 more breath weapons. Any archers back there with their bows and arrows? Yeah, the dragon has 2 more breath weapons after that first one. In order to attack this dragon, they're standing in the acid, and every round that acid does damage. Every single round. So, it's a nightmare. It is a nightmare attacking a black dragon in an underground setting. I've been playing D&D I've been running it since 1980. And I've killed more player characters underground with black dragons than with any other monster. They are just so completely devastating. I try not to run them unless I got a high level group of players who can take the first hit and run away, kind of thing, But Sometimes you get those players that are just hard-headed and they don't want. We have to kill that dragon. So be it. Just to add more to the notches, you know.
Blue dragons. I did a video a while back detailing why I like using black dragons in underground settings because the acid pools. Go and check that video out. I figured I'd do videos on the other dragon types, the other evil ones that players generally run afoul of. But this first one is about blue dragons. Blue dragons live in deserts and arid lands, making their lair in some vast cave or underground cavern. Dragons of this type are very smart, and 30% of them employ magic. Blue dragons fight with claw, bite, but their most devastating attack is their breath weapon, a lightning bolt. It's a half double mark wide by 10 double mark long. And if you don't understand the measurement system in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, double mark outside is in yards, 10 yards. Double mark inside is in feet. So indoors it would be 5 feet wide by 100 feet long. Outside it would be 5 yards wide by 100 yards long. It's like a beam. It's like a phaser beam or something. These dragons' lightning bolts is exceedingly effective if the targets are standing in water or wearing metal armor. Check out my videos on electricity in situations like this. I did one called Watch Your Fire. That's a good one. While blue dragons live in arid areas, this is something to think about if you're a dungeon master. Blue dragons live in very arid, dry areas, but they require water just like other life forms. It would behoove them to choose lairs with underground water sources, and this may provide a nice place to hide their treasure. Should player characters try to steal it, they have to go into the water. And lightning and water makes a wonderful weapon against player characters, especially if those player characters are wearing armor. The only treasure vulnerable to an electrical current under or maybe water might be the maps, which can of course be protected from electricity in watertight ceramic cases. Now, all that being said, the dragon lives in this underground cave. It's got a pool of water that he drinks from. That's his water source. He hides his treasure in the pool. The player characters go in there. They're looking for it. They see it. They get down in the water. One breath weapon, and they're, broiled. Broiled player characters. Blue dragons excel at aerial combat. Their breath weapon is not really exceptional at strafing runs because it's more of a pow thing, like a blaster. But they're limited on how many they get. So strafing runs, not so much. But aerial combat against flying mounts that the PCs are always fond of, like Pegasus and stuff like that, man, it works really good against them. It acts kind of like a beam weapon, like a blaster, In many instances, blue dragons can make a formidable opponent for most player character groups. Many players are excited at the prospect of facing a dragon, but seem inordinately surprised when their plate mail armor multiplies the damage of the blue dragon's breath weapon. At that point, most players are scrambling to find some way to escape, and rightly so. If you think a lightning bolt's going to hurt somebody, imagine if that somebody was wearing plate mail armor. Yeah, it can get really nasty. I suggest that if you're going to run a blue dragon, make sure that he has an underground lair and that his treasure is in the water source in that underground lair. To me, that makes the most logical sense. And it's not to unduly or unfairly rig the game against the players, but if you're a blue dragon and you can breathe a lightning bolt, you want your best weapon to be as effective as possible. So in that respect, yeah, you give yourself every advantage. If an intelligent creature is not giving itself every advantage in any kind of combat, it's not really intelligent. You see what I'm saying? You got to play it as such. If your players want to succeed, they'll have to play better. Be better players. Defeat the laws of physics or bend the laws of physics. The laws of physics, they define our reality. Magic, by definition, warps those laws. It warps reality. So, in an area where, in a place where magic is prevalent, the laws of physics have to apply. A gas that's heavier than air sinks down and collects in low areas. Basic physics. You have to keep that in mind, otherwise, because I guarantee you, the minute you stop taking that into account, your players are going to use it against you. Smart players will. Since the dragon is immune to its own breath weapon, a good defensive strategy might be to stay in a low area in the underground lair. Any player characters wishing to engage the dragon in melee combat will have to brave the gas. You get those players who go, well, it's a gas, I'll shoot it with a fireball and blow it up. Well, guess what? Chlorine gas is not flammable, so it cannot be ignited to hurt the dragon. Fireballs and other spells will hurt the dragon, but they won't ignite the gas. Players who want to hurt the dragon will have to do it the old-fashioned way. Missile weapons generally do minimal damage, and melee fighters have to breathe, so, it gives the dragon a significant advantage there. And it comes right down to it. A dragon will fight as vicious, I don't care how smart it is, a dragon will fight as vicious as any savage, barbarian, or whatever. Claw, bite, it's got a tail, it'll jump on them because it's big and it weighs a lot. Its wings can slap them. A headbutt works. My contention is a dragon that's smart will fall back on those when it has to, but it already has defensive tactics in its head because it's lived a long time and it knows these things. Play the dragon as such. If you have a dragon that's exceedingly stupid, chances are it won't last long. Either the players are going to kill it or it should have died a long time ago. Either way, play dragons like they're smart, because most of them are. There's some that aren't, but most of them are. White dragons. I've done videos on black, blue, and green dragons. I'm pretty sure that players of a game titled Advanced Dungeons & Dragons at some point expect to run into dragons. I'm no genius, but to me that seems somewhat logical. Just saying. This one is about white dragons. White dragons prefer chilly or cold regions and make their lairs in icy caves in mountainous areas or in subterranean places. Now note, finding food enough to feed a large dragon is difficult in Arctic regions, so mountaintops seem more logical than deep subterranean areas. A dragon can fly from any area, so I suppose beggars can't be choosers. If there are no mountains in the area, then he's got to live underground. But as a dragon, I would pick a mountain top over an underground lair. A little harder to get to, a little more defendable. White dragons have a 1 in 20 chance to use magic. They aren't the brightest bulbs. And their breath weapon is a cone of cold, a cone of frost. And that cone of frost is devastating in certain aspects. Old dragons they have lived a long time, and they know how best to use their breath weapons. They know in what circumstances their breath weapons will work best. If they don't employ the best possible means, they won't live that long. Somebody will have killed them before now. Because dragons live in icy regions, Arctic regions essentially, there's the terrain is their advantage. Not only do they breathe frost, but they're immune to it, and they love the cold. Most warm-blooded things like player characters don't. If a group of player characters want to fight a white dragon, they have to brave the Arctic temperatures. A trek to that area of operation. Their AO is an ice-covered wasteland. Any player characters who survive the trek are prepared for the cold. If said trek is accidental and unexpected, which kind of limits how that could happen, but I suppose somebody could banish them there. They could be an accidental teleport something. Then the player characters may very well be half dead through starvation and or frostbite by the time they reach the lair. It's either planned or not. If it's planned, the player characters will have cold weather gear, plenty of supplies, and a plan for confronting said dragon. If that is the case, the dragon will have a difficult time and must be as savage and vicious as possible. He may even have to retreat if he's able to. Flying away is a useful tactic. Very few people can keep up with a dragon. If it's not planned, the player characters will not be well outfitted and supplied. If so, the dragon just should blast him repeatedly with his icy breath and have meat sickles later. That's pretty much it. He may have to use his claws and teeth a bit, but I can't see him having too tough a time. Most white dragons are pretty badass. Any player character is low level enough to be accidentally or unexpectedly stuck in that situation and then trek to an ice cave that houses a white dragon, well, they're pretty well screwed before they got to the cave. Just saying. Now, my contention is this. Because of how remote the area would be, any group of player characters going into a white dragon's lair are either there on purpose or they're not. On purpose, they have supplies, weapons, items, and spells prepared to deal with that dragon. The dragon should and this is, if I was the dragon, this is what I would do. I would concentrate on the spellcasters, especially wizards, and then once they are dead, destroy the group's supplies. Then the dragon can fly off and wait for them to die, or wait for them to leave. They'll either have to leave quickly and get out before they run out of food, or before they starve to death, or they'll die there, in which case the dragon has a nice meal. But now keep in mind, white dragons are not that bright. They're savage, and they may have a good head for tactics, but they're not that bright. So, use your judgment in playing a white dragon. If the player characters are not there on purpose, which means someone stuck them there, or if it was an accident or whatever, the players may not be well supplied and may not know they are in a dragon's cave. The dragon should just basically kill them all and have a nice Chianti. That's pretty much what it boils down to. Any players that escape, if they're lucky enough or fortunate enough, or what's the word I'm looking for? If they can outfight a dragon at low levels like that, they earned it, let me tell you. But keep in mind, white dragons are not that intelligent. They're not like other dragons in that respect, but they are as evil and vicious as they come. So play them accordingly. Again, I'm not saying this is how you have to do it, but I found it works well in my game, and it's just advice. Take it or leave it. By far, the most prolific dragon type players run into in this game is the red dragon. Classically, when people think about dragons, this is the type they think of. A fire-breathing engine of pure evil and destruction, hoarding gold and other treasure, and feasting on knights. This is the quintessential dragon people think of. In Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, there are many different types of dragons, some good and some evil. Regardless, red dragons are still by far the most prolific. Red dragons fight with a claw bite in close quarters, but they favor their fiery breath weapons by far. They also have a 4 in 10 chance to use magic spells. They are exceptionally intelligent and must be played as such. They are the most evil of all dragons. I want to talk about their breath weapon. Their breath weapon has been portrayed in different ways in movies and TV series. I don't see a dragon's breath weapon melting steel. I guess it could in concentrated bursts. If they sit there and concentrate on one item, they could possibly melt it. But generally, when a dragon uses its breath weapon, most of the time dragons aren't up against one opponent. They tend to be fighting a group of player characters or a group of other things. So, share the wealth. Hit that fire breath and just spray the room. You know what I'm saying? And that's still very, very effective because once something is on fire, it burns until you put it out. Which, by the way, makes this really great for strafing runs. If you have an army on the ground, a red dragon coming down out of the clouds, and using its breath weapon in a long run across the battlefield, you can kill thousands of people easily. Dragons are nasty. Red dragons are the quintessential nasty critter. And God forbid they have magic spells, so that makes them worse. And again, play them as intelligent creatures. They're not stupid. The best rendition of a dragon that I can think of a red dragon, is from the movie The Hobbit, the Smaug in Lord of the Rings, in The Hobbit, where he's talking with Bilbo in the treasure chamber. That conversation completely typifies how dragons think, how they talk. The dragon was toying with him because it knew it could kill anything that comes in its path. It had in order to take that gold hoard, it killed a city, an entire city, and they couldn't touch it. These dragons know they're the baddest of the badasses, and they know they don't have to worry about a damn thing. Play them as such. Red dragons make their lairs in caves and underground caverns in hills or mountainous regions. As with other dragon types, red dragons enjoy amassing hordes of treasure, which is one of the reasons adventurers tend to seek them out. Most adventurers aren't successful in getting the dragon hoard, but you do hear stories of it happening. As a dungeon master, you need to think like whatever monster you are running against your players. Whatever monster you're running against the players, you need to think like that monster. Check out my video, D&D Stories Monsters. An ogre isn't the brightest bulb, but he just wants to kill things. A troll knows that he regenerates. Play him as such. Whenever possible, when running red dragons, I try to let as many of the player characters advance into a specific area where the breath weapon can be the most effective. In any underground cavern, you want to keep the player characters away from the water source to make it more difficult to douse the flames after you light them up. Most dragons make their lairs in caves, and they have to drink. They have to eat. Chances are a dragon will pick a cave with an underground water source. You want to keep the players away from that if you're using a red dragon, because that'll let them put the fires out. You don't want them to do that. Getting the entire group of player characters in an enclosed area 30 feet by 30 feet is ideal, because they are all within the area of effect of the fiery breath. Once lit up, the player characters burn every round until they find a way to douse themselves. This can be very effective against spellcasters because it's very difficult for a spellcaster to concentrate to cast spells while he's burning to death. I did a video, I want to say it was titled "Those Pesky Spellcasters," how to deal with them. You throw a spear, stick it in their chest, and leave it, pull a different weapon, and keep fighting, because it's hard to concentrate and cast spells with the shaft of wood stuck out of your chest. Works pretty well if they're on fire, too. That's all I'm saying. An old dragon has 6 hit points per die. At 9 hit dice, that's 54 hit points. The fire breath also does that 54 hit points damage. A wizard taking even half of that, which means he makes a savings throw, is 27 points per round. He simply will not last that long. Wizards taking that kind of damage, they're not going to be casting spells until they find a way to douse themselves. Any dungeon master who ignores the effect of fire on a spellcaster needs to be enlightened. Don't be afraid to retreat as a red dragon. The beast can always return after he's healed up and track the player characters to their camp. I did this in a game and I was called vicious. But see if this doesn't make sense. The player characters were in there trying to quietly steal from the dragon's horde. The dragon was asleep. He woke up. There was a battle. The players actually got lucky on several crits and were starting to win. The dragon breathed fire on everybody, and while they were dealing with that, he took off because he was hurting. He took off. He flew away. He found a secluded mountaintop or something and rested and recuperated. Because dragons heal pretty quick, you know. So the player characters loaded up on as much treasure as they could carry, and they went out, got their horses and mules, loaded them up, and they're hauling ass, or not really hauling ass, but they're heading off back to town with their haul. They get to the first night, or actually it was the second night of their travel, because they had to travel slow because they were carrying all that extra weight. Gold is heavy, you know. And they stopped for camp. They had a guard on duty and everything. Everything was great. Until out of the darkness, the dragon came back, incinerated the entire encampment with his 3 breath weapons and in strafing runs, killed the entire party, took his treasure back to his cave. To me, evil dragons would do that. I was called vicious and evil by my players until they saw the Lord of the Rings movie where the dragon took off to go kill that town. Broke off combat to go and kill that town. Revenge! Remember that part? Yeah. So don't be afraid to play dragons as vicious, vindictive bastards, because they are. Attacking sleeping player characters is just evil, but it's right up their alley. Don't be afraid to play evil characters as evil characters. If your players have a problem with that, maybe they should, I don't know, go tackle a few rabbits, or, I don't know, maybe a squirrel. Maybe that's more up their alley. Good dragons. I've done videos on the evil dragons in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. I've got one on the red dragon that's coming out here soon. But good dragons, since good dragons rarely hinder players in the game, technically they're still considered monsters, though, because as I understand it, I've always went under the premise that anything that's not the player characters is considered a monster. Now, in that case, some monsters are helpful, and these could very well be helpful. But I need to talk about them, because there are, I guess, evil player characters who might want to attack one for some stupid ass reason. So here we go. Good dragons in the monster manual are the brass dragons, bronze dragons, copper dragons, gold dragons, and silver dragons. I'm going to kind of lump all of them into this one video because many of them share the breath weapons of the evil ones, and I really want to avoid redundancy. Now, that being said, I might do videos later on the individual dragon types, but since these in the game, these dragons usually are helpful, and they're exceedingly nice, the chances of a group of good player characters going into combat with one of these is pretty slim. But on the off chance, I figured I'd talk about them. Brass dragons are chaotic good. Their breath weapons include sleep gas and fear gas. Since the properties of these gases are almost unknown, the only thing I can say is that enclosed spaces would be their forte. They would prefer to live in enclosed areas where those gases would be more effective, kind of like the chlorine gas. I don't know if these are heavier or lighter than air, but so I'm not sure if they would settle into low areas, but enclosed spaces would be good. Now this fear gas, that's the one problem with that. In an enclosed area, you have to have an escape venue for the fear gas. Otherwise, the fear gas doesn't really do much other than scare the hell out of them. Scared people who can't escape might actually fight harder. So, you want to have an avenue for them to escape. You just don't want the gas to be able to disperse. So, and again, all dragons have the claw bite thing going on. Most of the good dragons are loath to enter combat unless they have to, but if they do, they're just as vicious as any of the evil dragons. Play them as such. If they're forced into combat, these guys will fuck something up. The brass dragons, again, are chaotic good, so they're more apt to go into combat than other good dragons. But again, you got to play them as fairly intelligent creatures, very intelligent creatures. Bronze dragons are lawful good, meaning they won't fight unless they absolutely have to. Their breath weapons include lightning and repulsion gas. Since the properties of the repulsion gas are unknown, again, enclosed spaces with an exit. And for the lightning, check out the blue dragon. I did a video on blue dragons, and their breath weapon is lightning. One thing I noticed about these good dragons, they have more than one breath weapon, and that's always nice. Copper dragons are also chaotic good like the brass dragons, so they're more willing to fight. They're a little more capable, in my opinion. They have acid and slow gas. The slow gas slows people as per the spell. So, enclosed areas, that would be their ally. As for the acid, you hit... I did a video on black dragons, why I like to use black dragons in underground settings. Acid pools in underground settings. So if the dragon's in the middle of it, it's immune to the acid. For somebody to go into melee combat, they have to be in the acid. You see what I'm saying? Now, pair that with slow gas, which makes them not move quickly. They'll be in the gas even longer. Well, one of the things people don't really... A lot of DMs do this. When the monster's dead, people stop taking damage, blah, 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 blah. The problem is, the acid remains. Okay? So, you're fighting a black dragon, for example, and the copper dragon would be the same thing. You're fighting one of these dragons. You're standing in a pool of acid fighting a dragon. How stupid is that, right? Well, the dragon exhales slow gas. The copper dragon exhales slow gas. So you're moving really damn slow while you're fighting. Your group manages to slay said dragon. The acid is still there, and the slow gas, which by the way is not a spell, so it doesn't die when the wizard does, because some magic users or some dungeon masters play it like that. This is in effect for the full duration. So they kill the dragon and they're standing in the acid and they're trying to get out of the acid and they're moving real damn slow. Take more damage. Yeah, the acid doesn't magically go away. You still have to deal with it. The effects of the slow gas last until the effects go away. So copper dragons can be quite nasty. Gold dragons are lawful good. They breathe fire like a red dragon, and they breathe chlorine gas like a green dragon. And also, they can polymorph. Gold dragons, they're two breath weapons, in my opinion. They're good, but using them at the same time, fire and then chlorine gas and then fire and then, that's not necessarily really effective. Chlorine gas doesn't burn, so it's not. If it doesn't burn, it won't. It might actually put out the fires. So you want to do that in moderation. If somebody's susceptible to fire, use the fire. Just stick with the fire. If somebody's and people go, well, you're setting the players up for failure. No, I'm playing a gold dragon. Gold dragons know what they can do. They know how their breath weapons act. You have to play the dragons accordingly. If they're in an enclosed area or in a low area, the chlorine gas is exceptionally effective. if they're in a low area and you want to drive them out of it, the chlorine gas, and then when they come out, the fire. Gold dragons can be exceptionally effective. It's the same effect as the chlorine gas in the machine guns in World War II that I talked about in the Green Dragon video. Silver dragons are lawful good, which means they also loathe combat. However, they do frost and paralyzing gas. Paralyzing gas is really that to me, that's a nasty combination as well. The paralyzing gas, you want to do it in an enclosed area so that they're paralyzed. After that, if you really want them dead, now these guys are lawful good, so I doubt they'd be this vicious. You paralyze them and then you get rid of them somehow. If you really want them dead, you paralyze them and then use your frost breath, because they can't move. They can't generate their more body heat to avoid the worst effects of the frost. So they'll freeze to death faster. The laws of physics apply, people. And I did a video on white dragons about the frost breath, so go check that out. Silver dragons can also polymorph, and they're very good at it. Note that good dragons, like I said, have 2 breath weapons each, and this gives them a lot more flexibility in a lot of areas. When you have to really think if you're going to take a good dragon into combat, because they have so many perks that, and a lot of these good dragons can also use magic, so keep that in mind. They have a lot of perks, and you can easily screw up a party with a good dragon. Just one good dragon of any type. Most good dragons are generally portrayed as kindly old recluses who aid the player characters through wise and sage advice, sometimes flying in to pull them out of a bad situation. I try and do dragons more as individuals, taking their alignments into account and giving them distinct personalities and motivations. Gotta have good coffee in your life. The more time and effort you put into the backstories of your NPCs, especially your dragons, will pay off in the long run with your players. I would imagine most dragons do enjoy their solitude, but what if a dragon wants to help out humans? What if they have an agenda of some kind? What if they had an ally way back in the past and they're looking after the descendants of that ally? Maybe the bronze dragon on the coast wants to learn about the humans in the city, so he assumes the form of a donkey or a porpoise. Maybe the silver dragon assumes the shape of a kindly old man or a rabbit to observe a barbarian village. The rabbit might be kind of iffy because they might get hungry, but the point being, who knows? Imagine a barbarian trying to kill a dragon polymorphed into a rabbit because he thinks it's a rabbit. I've hit that thing with 12 arrows, it just won't die. Screw it. At any rate, regardless, players who encounter multiple good dragons who have no life goals and exist only to hand out sage advice and useful information will grow bored with those dragons quickly. The last thing you want to do in a Dungeons and Dragons game is to make the players, bored with dragons. The last thing you want to do is make the dragons in Dungeons and Dragons boring. Mix it up a little. Do some different things with your dragons. Give them personalities. Give them goals. Give them motivations that take them out of the norms. Remember, dragons are intelligent creatures. They form bonds with people. You can be friends with a good dragon. Bad guys can be friends with an evil dragon. I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend trying because that's exceedingly rare. But good dragons, on the other hand, you can be friends with a good dragon, and they can be very, very useful friends. But if that's all you became a friend with a good dragon for, was because they're useful, yeah, you're doing it for the wrong reason. But again, as the dungeon master, play dragons accordingly. They're intelligent. They have their own goals and motivations. When any dragon, good or evil, gets pissed off, they fight just as viciously as any other dragon, as any evil dragon. They put barbarians to shame. They're exceptionally knowledgeable in how best to use their weapons, and especially their breath weapons. Because whether a dragon has magic or not is aside, all of them have their breath weapons. So play them accordingly. Don't let your dragons be boring. All right? I did the dragons from the Monster Manual, and I had forgotten about the dragons in the Monster Manual too. So here we go. Mist dragons. Mist dragons are solitary creatures making their lairs in rainforests where there's lots of rain, sea coasts, or near waterfalls. They love the water. Mist dragons can assume a cohesive gaseous form and appear as mist, which is their favored form. Mist doesn't even burn, so I don't see how any player characters could attack them in that form. It's crazy. Maybe with cold, I guess, to freeze them? I don't know. Their alignment is neutral. The Mist Dragon's alignment is neutral, so it's hard-pressed to get them into a fight to begin with, and it would be difficult to get them to actually go to try to attack somebody. Mist Dragons attack with a double clawing, a bite, and a lash with its scaly, jagged tail. Their breath weapon is a misty cloud of vapors. Air-breathing creatures can drown in this vapor. Check out the description in the Monster Manual 2 for particulars, because there's a process for that, but how much damage they take and this and that. But this can be very deadly for air-breathing creatures, especially if they're encountered on the ocean. If a mist dragon breathes its misty breath weapon, and the player character can turn and run away, they can get out of it, the area of effect, and they can save themselves. If they're on the ocean or floating in the ocean, that's hard to do. All they've got to do is put this misty breath weapon on the boat, or if they're in a boat, that is, and the only recourse the player characters have is to jump overboard, which defeats the purpose of having a boat. You see what I'm saying? On ocean settings, mist dragons are nasty. All mist dragons employ magic spells of various types. It just depends on how many spells. So in that respect, they're very, very dangerous as well. These dragons are very smart. Play them as such. They will use the terrain to their advantage. Player characters trying to attack them face drowning, or barring that, may very well not be able to attack the dragon at all if it's in mist form. When you come right down to it, any creature that can turn into mist is difficult to attack. You have to employ spells, basically, or I don't know. There's a reason mist dragons don't live in the Arctic. So I would suggest cold for the player characters. Don't suggest that to them. But if they come up with it, that could be a viable attack for them. Fire generally probably wouldn't affect them. Maybe turn them to steam, which is another form of mist. So that I would say that the mist would make them immune to fire in mist form. If it was a gaseous form and the gas was flammable, maybe. But in mist form, no, I can't see that. The one time the player characters in my game found and tried to kill a mist dragon, they couldn't affect it, so they just finally gave up and left. At some point you say, well, crap, okay, and leave. That's a viable tactic. I mean, it's not like you can do anything to it. So yeah, read up on mist dragons. They're interesting creatures. And if you can run one in your game, it'll give a nice little diversion to your player characters. Cloud dragons. Cloud dragons are extremely solitary creatures who make their lairs in cloud-covered mountaintop caves or on cloud islands, kind of like cloud giants. These dragons can assume a gaseous form at will, and so 75% of the time they appear as normal clouds. They are neutral in alignment. They like to be left alone, and if they turn to cloud, I don't, into cloud form, I really don't know of a way. I mean, you're hard-pressed to hurt them, so they can just turn to a cloud and float away. It helps them to be solitary. They are neutral, so they're not going to go out and search out bad. I mean, it would take something serious for them to go search out a fight. Cloud dragons can attack with claw bite or a tail lash, or they exude a powerful air blast which will blow the target away, doing damage equal to the dragon's hit points. Read the description on page 56 in the Monster Manual 2 for particulars, because there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the basic gist. All cloud dragons use spells. They're extremely dangerous in that respect. The few times player characters in my games have tried to fight a cloud dragon, they were easily outmatched. They were on the two times I can recall. One, the dragon was in a... It lived in a cave, and there was an outcropping of stone with a cliff face. The player characters were on that outcropping when they tried to launch their attack. The cloud dragon used its breath weapon and shoved them all over the edge. They all died. 4th level characters fighting a cloud dragon the players deserve that. They were stupid. The other time they were fairly higher level characters, and this dragon lived in a cloud on a cloud island, and they had made it up there, and they were actually looking for a cloud giant, to be honest. But they found this dragon and decided they wanted to try to have some dragon stew. That actually was their term. We're going to have dragon stew for dinner. The dragon overheard them. Didn't take that too kindly. They were easily killed by this 12 to 14 hit die critter. I want to say it was a 13 hit die critter. But, yeah, several of them were blown off the cloud and fell to their death. The 2 or 3 remaining were easily killed by this thing because it's got spells, it's got claw bite. That tail lash knocked another one off. I mean, it was horrific. These players underestimated the cloud dragon, and they were not prepared for what happened. These dragons are literally geniuses, so play them as such. When you're running them against your players, if the players know it, if it's general knowledge that the players know, chances are the cloud dragon knows it. The cloud dragon probably knows a lot of stuff they don't know. Play them as such. Use the terrain to their advantage. Like I said, blow them off the cliff, blow them off the cloud. Turn to cloud and float away in worst case scenarios. If the players are able to actually kill a cloud dragon, either they got really, really lucky or the dungeon master didn't play them properly. I can't imagine any group of player characters stumbling on a cloud dragon and being able to defeat it through sheer force. If the dragon can't kill them, he'll get away. He can fly. If they're still chasing him, he'll turn to cloud so they can't hurt him. It's crazy. Any player character stupid enough to compel a cloud dragon to fight them deserve what they get. And shadow dragons. I did the dragons from the Monster Manual, and I'd forgotten about the ones in the Monster Manual too. And here comes, probably in my opinion, the deadliest one. And I'll get to it as to why here in a minute. If you run your player characters against a shadow dragon, you either have a hell of a lot of faith in them, or you really don't like them. Okay, that's just the way it is. Shadow dragons are nocturnal and prefer subterranean areas or planes of dimness. They are very, very solitary. Shadow dragons cannot abide hot climates or Arctic conditions, but make their lairs in cooler, temperate regions. Which is generally the area where most people adventure. Shadow dragons are poor flyers and prefer to walk. Shadow dragon size is determined differently than other dragon types, so read up on that. They don't see well in bright light, but have ultra and infravision in exceptional capabilities. So keep that in mind. They'll be able to see things that most players can't, but at the same time, bright light is not good for them. They prefer darkness, dimness, twilight, nighttime. Only shadow dragons of 17 plus intelligence can cast spells, but the ones they do get are quite nasty, so read up on that. The alignment of these dragons is neutral evil. Play them as such. These guys are not nice. The shadow dragon can attack with claw, bite, or with its breath weapon. This is the one that really gets me. Dragons are allowed 3 breath weapons per day, right? This is a cloud of tangible darkness. This darkness blinds the victims, as well as taking 75% of their levels or hit dice temporarily for as many turns as the dragon has age categories. So, if it's a 7, if it's in a 7th age, it takes it for 7 turns. That's 70 rounds. And if they make their savings throw versus breath weapon, they still lose 50% of their level or hit dice for the same length of time. So you can turn a 10th level character into a 5th level character. You can turn a 4th level character into a 2nd level character. It's nasty. And that's if they make their save. Because a 10th level character then becomes a 3rd level character. A 4th level character becomes a 1st level character. You see what I'm saying? The breath weapon of these things is just nasty. This is exceptionally nasty because it limits the player character's ability to attack him, as well as taking hit points. Because they lose all the abilities, they lose the spells, they lose the hit points, they lose it all for that length of time. And in that length of time, that dragon can have a field day. I believe the dragon would call it feasting, because that's all y'all have to do. Shadow dragons can hide in shadows as a 10th level thief, makes them exceptionally dangerous as sneak attacks, as, for surprising their victims. When fighting this dragon type, it would behoove the player characters to prevent the breath weapon or avoid it altogether. Any hit with this thing is so very devastating. Plan accordingly. Now, as the dungeon master, if I were a shadow dragon and I knew people were coming to kill me, I would hide in shadows whenever possible and attack with this breath weapon from surprise. They're sneaking along, trying to be as quiet as they can, and out of the darkness erupts and saps their levels and hit dice. That's what should happen. If I'm the dragon, that's what I'm going to do. Why? Because I can. Follow that up with spells or claw, bite, because the player characters will be so weakened that they should die pretty damn quickly. This dragon is nasty. I don't run this dragon against player characters that I feel can't handle it or can't deal with it, or that are so low level that it would be pointless. This is the kind of a dragon you run against player characters who are trying to become gods. That's the dragon you run against the big bad nasty player characters. Okay? Because this is a big bad nasty dragon. I wouldn't, again, dungeon masters who run shadow dragons either have a lot of faith in their players, or they really don't like them very much. Want to teach them a lesson. Either way, be careful how you use shadow dragons, because they can end your campaign pretty fucking quick. The Greater Basilisk. Everyone has heard of a basilisk ever since Harry Potter. Now the ones in Dungeons and Dragons are a little different, but they're no less deadly. They are fearsome and dangerous, to be sure. But what many people overlook is a basilisk's bigger and meaner cousin, the Greater Basilisk. As bad as basilisks are, greater basilisks are worse. The Greater Basilisk can be found on page 15 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual 2. Be sure to read through it very thoroughly before you put one of these in your game. They can really screw up your campaign if you don't use them right, or if you if your players can't deal with it, you know what I'm saying? They can really screw up your campaign. These are 10 hit die critters with an armor class of 2, which makes them very formidable. They have multiple attack modes. Their claw bite does 1-6, 1-6, 2-12. This is respectable, especially since their claws are poisonous. Then, this thing has such noxious breath that it makes victims save or die. Yeah. Use a breath mint, that's for sure. On top of all of that, this thing has the petrifying gaze like the cousin does. So, this thing is, oh my god, terrifying. It's 12 feet long and has 8 legs. The only downside is that its movement is slow. It moves at 6 double mark, which is not great. These things are often used as guardians because their movement is so slow, so they get into a fixed position and guard an area. They're rarely encountered in the wild, just wandering around. This thing can really ruin an entire party's day, regardless of how many is in that party. The gaze has a range of 50 feet. There's no limit to the usage of said gaze. Every attacker has to make a save every round that they meet the gaze. If they close to attack, it has breath from hell, and it's not. Technically it's a breath weapon, but this isn't. Oh look, he took damage. This is save or die. They're nasty. These things are freaking nasty. Be very, very careful how you use this thing because it is designed to end campaigns by petrifying and or killing all of your player characters. That's what it's designed for. It's a freaking gun turret that sits there and kills things. And the sad part is it can still move. It moves slowly, but it can move. Just be aware. When I do these monster videos, I always say, read through them very thoroughly before you put these in your game. I've only run into one of these greater basilisks in my entire 40-something years of gaming, and I died immediately. Most of the group died immediately. It was crazy. We had one guy survive, and when he tried to turn and run away, another bad guy got him because this guy had a greater basilisk and something else was there. I don't recall what it was, but the other thing got that guy. So it's not like he had the opportunity to run away. It was crazy. And by the way, all that happened in like the first 2 rounds. So keep that in mind. The Behir, Behir, Behir. The Behir is one of the more dangerous critters a dungeon master can stick into his game. The description for this creature is on page 18 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual 2. Read up on it very thoroughly before you use it in your game. In melee combat, the Behir attacks with a bite, which does 2 to 8 points of damage. Then it loops its body around the victim and squeezes for 2 to 5 damage. If the constriction is successful, then the victim is subject to 6 talon attacks for 1 to 6 damage each. This melee damage is quite formidable. It's not that any one thing does a lot, but there's a lot of the little things, The primary attack form for this thing is a breath weapon. Every 10 rounds, this thing spits a lightning bolt. This attack does 24 points of damage. A Behir will attack with its breath weapon first, as it is the best weapon that it has. Check out my videos on electricity and friendly fire. Electricity, lightning can be very, very devastating. And it must also be noted that these beasts sometimes travel in pairs. Their intelligence is low, but it's not animal, it's low. They are fairly they're intelligent, so they can form rudimentary tactical plans. They can also climb and move along walls with ease at a movement of 7.5 double mark, half their normal movement. These things are atrocious in combat. It's hard to fight them. About 15 years ago, my nephew and some of his friends were playing in a small game that I was running. I had designed this adventure before they had made their characters. They all had plate mail or chain mail and only one spellcaster, a cleric. I advised they needed a wizard, but they ignored me, and I said, okay. They were slogging through knee-deep water when the first Behir, because they were in an underground setting, and the group was traveling through here, and the area had been flooded. They were slogging through knee-deep water when the first Behir spat its lightning bolt. 2 of the 5th level characters died immediately, leaving 3 others. Because they're standing in water and wearing metal armor, they took double damage, you see. The group turned to charge at the Behir who attacked them, but before they could attack it, the other Behir spat its lightning bolt and fried them all. None of the rest had enough hit points left to do anything. I had not intended to kill the party, the entire freaking party. It turned out to be a TPK, total party kill, but I hadn't intended it. What are you supposed to do? I mean, they had no thief. They had no. They were just walking along. Nobody stated they were on watch or sneaking or trying to keep an eye out for bad guys or whatever. They were just slogging along through the cavern. And by the way, the group made up new characters. They lived and learned. They had a thief, they had a wizard, they had fighters, they had a cleric. I mean, it just it worked out better after that. But it was in the same campaign later, so they kind of knew what to watch out for. But that's okay, because there was more stuff beyond that they hadn't reached yet. So it worked out good, and everybody had fun. But the point I'm getting at is these lightning can be dangerous. Behirs spit lightning. Their initial breath weapon itself isn't really that bad. But when you put them up against 5th level characters, yeah, who are all wearing plate mail armor, yeah. Given the circumstances, Behirs can be nasty. They can be exceedingly devastating. So just be careful how you use them. Read up on them very, very thoroughly. Dracolisk. One of my viewers requested I do a video on this. And so here we go. The Dracolisk is an odd duck in the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons world. It's not quite a dragon. It's not quite a basilisk, but it has many of the abilities of both. The book says it is most likely the offspring of a natural mating between a black dragon and a large basilisk. I tend to think that it's more likely a genetic splicing of those two creatures by some wizard, alchemist, or, whatever, for some reason. Either way, the critter is very effective. The Dracolisk can be found on page 55 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual 2. Be sure to read up on it very thoroughly before using it in your game. First off, in melee combat, a Dracolisk uses Claw Bite very, very effectively. But before it closes to melee range, a Dracolisk has 2 very special abilities. The first is the Petrifying Gaze. Anyone meeting the critter's gaze will be petrified. A special note here, the book does not specify that there's a savings throw. And this has been a point of contentious debate among players and dungeon masters for decades. I remember arguments on Dracolisks. Well, it has to have a savings throw, otherwise why do you have a savings throw versus petrification? Yeah, but the book specifically doesn't say, the book doesn't say it. It gives a savings throw for the breath weapon, but not for the gaze weapon. Yeah, but and back and forth and back and forth. Frankly, I think it should be up to the individual dungeon master whether or not player characters get a savings throw versus petrification. In my humble opinion, since the breath weapon specifies a savings throw, and then the gaze weapon does not get a savings throw because it's not specified. Again, that's just my opinion. The reason I say that is because there's also a chart for whether or not you look into its eyes while you're doing melee combat with it. So to me, that covers the saving throw aspect of it. That's just my opinion. Secondly, the critter can spit acid for 4 to 24, 4d6, 4 to 24 points of damage. Half of that if a save versus breath weapon is made. The Draculus can spit such acid 3 times per day. Now, this makes it a very, very difficult creature to combat. In my opinion, the Draculus would start out with the gaze weapon because it can eliminate the most enemies in the shortest time. Then, before those enemies can close the distance, a healthy dose of acid, which will cover them and the floor, should be liberally applied by said Draculus. I did a video why black dragons are so effective underground, and you got to go check that video out. You'll see what I'm talking about. In underground settings, acid pools, and if you're fighting a black dragon and it's standing in a pool of acid, in order to fight it with a melee weapon, you have to be standing in the acid, therefore taking damage every round. Even if it's only half damage, that's still a lot of acid damage. Unhealthy work environment. I believe that's the term I use. Excuse me. Note the chart in the critter's description regarding the chances of meeting the gaze. Also note that the gaze is in effect all the time, and any player character fighting the Draculus in melee combat fights at penalties. This thing is extremely effective. Extremely effective. Especially if it has to guard a specific area. You put like a door at the top of a set of stairs in a narrow area, and then put that Draculus, that being the only way to get to the door, and then you put that Draculus at the bottom of those steps in a narrow, confined area. Yeah, that's a hell of a guard right there. That's going to be difficult to get through. Especially if it decides that standing in a pool of acid is nice, which, being half black dragon, it's immune to. So, just saying. A Draculus can be very, very effective as a guardian. They fly for short periods of time, but they're not great at it. But they do have 6 legs and they're very fast. So keep that in mind. I prefer, if you're going to put a creature as a guardian, especially one this powerful, with a gaze weapon and an acid weapon that it is immune to, I would suggest a narrow corridor leading up to those steps, because that's less of an area for these people to bypass the monster. Plus, in an enclosed area, the acid, just saying. I don't want to harp on that, but to me, that's killed more player characters in my games than just about any other underground setting. It's a black dragon in an underground setting. Man, I've had groups of players. Oh, well, it's a dragon, underground, run. It's going to be a black dragon, run. That kind of thing. Not all of them are black dragons, but it's nice to know they are paying attention. The Tarrasque. I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons for 47 years, and I've only run into a Tarrasque twice. I've only used it as a dungeon master once. In all 3 instances, these encounters ended in total party kills. The Tarrasque is, in my opinion, the deadliest creature in the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons books. The Tarrasque can be found on pages 117 and 118 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual 2. Even a casual perusal of the description will reveal that this creature is an engine of destruction. This is the creature that dungeon masters use to wipe out entire nations in their world. There is only one Tarrasque. It is a singular creature. This monster lays waste to entire areas. It eats anything and everything. Creatures up to 2 hit dice, under 3 hit dice or level, are automatically paralyzed until it is out of their range of vision. No saving throw. So 1st or 2nd level characters, yeah, you're stuck there. You got nothing going on. That's it. Creatures from 3 to 6 hit dice flee in panic with no savings throw. So if you're up to 6th level, 3rd to 6th level, you're just going to run away in fear. There's no savings throw. In panic, it says. So there are dungeon masters who differentiate panic and fear. I do not. That's just me. Creatures 7 hit die and higher will flee in panic 7th level or higher will flee in panic unless a savings throw versus paralyzation is made. So, yeah, it's a nasty creature. Most people flee from it. Most of your 0 level creatures, peasants, that kind of thing, yeah, they're just going to run away. Drink of coffee there. The creature has a carapace, which, for those of you who don't know, it's like a partial exoskeleton, like on its back, kind of like a turtle, basically. It has a carapace which blocks magical bolts and rays, including magic missiles, and reflects these attacks back at the caster 1 time out of 6. So there's a 1 in 6 chance that somebody uses shoots a spell at it, and it reflects back on the caster. The Tarrasque is immune to fire, and it regenerates 1 hit point per round and can only be hit by +1 or better magical weapons. That makes it extremely nasty. You can have an army of peasants with pitchforks and not a damn one of them can touch it. I don't care how many crits they roll. It's immune to anything not magical. Now here's where it gets into the tricky part. Slaying a Tarrasque is a tricky and difficult task. The beast has to be reduced to -30 hit points, and then a wish spell used to wish for its death. The wish spell is a 9th level spell, so it requires an 18th level wizard. I've played with a dungeon master who basically told the group that it was possible to use a limited wish in this capacity in his game. This is a dungeon master's judgment call, and it was his game. So, the limited wish is a 7th level spell requiring a 14th level magic user to cast. So if you don't run away, he can jump in there and do it. Without using this specific procedure, even the slightest piece of the Tarrasque will regenerate and restore it completely. Note the treasures which the body parts will yield. You can turn parts of the creature into treasures. So, I'm not going to list it here, but just keep that in mind. You got to read the description. Also, the only good thing about fighting this particular creature, it is not very smart. It has an animal intelligence, so it can be tricked, it can be distracted, that kind of thing. Note that Tarrasque's active schedule in the last paragraph of the description. The Tarrasque is not active 24/7. It has a schedule, so keep that in mind. As a dungeon master, that'll be very important. And once the players figure that part out, it'll be very important to them as well. Years ago, I was playing in my friend Randy's game. Randy is an excellent dungeon master. He's actually got more time in the game than I do, but he doesn't game as much as me. So I say we're about even. Years ago, I was playing in my friend Randy's game. Our group of 7 18th level players were tasked with destroying the Tarrasque. None of the players knew anything about the creature, so we just attacked it outright. This is long before I read up on it in the book. So, our thief and barbarian failed their saving throws and fled in panic. The wizard cast a fireball on the beast, which was reflected back at the group. Danny, the player running the wizard, rolled 14 out of 18 dice as 6s. He had 18 6-sided dice, 14 of them were 6s. The total, as I recall, was something like 96 points of damage. The entire party had to make saving throws. The wizard and the assassin both died. The rest of them I was the assassin. The rest of us were all severely damaged. The Tarrasque then attacked and slew our cleric outright, rolling 2 out of 5 attacks as critical strikes. This was just sheer dumb luck, bad luck on our part. Good luck for the creature. The only 2 player characters remaining, a fighter and a ranger, being run by my friends Jesse and Earl, fought well until they were slain. When the 2 player characters who fled, the thief and the barbarian, recovered and returned to fight, they too were slain. They insisted on returning, Randy gave them the option to get out. They said, no, we want to go back and avenge our friends. The barbarian pride, and the thief was like, there's got to be some treasure over there. So they tried and they died. F around and find out, right? It was a total party kill, and my assassin died along with the rest. Hell, I failed my saving throw, and the initial reflected fireball incinerated me. It was crazy. The Tarrasque is one of those monsters that counts as a natural disaster. The only difference here is that the player characters cannot fight a flash flood, a tornado, or a wildfire, while they can conceivably fight a Tarrasque. It ain't easy, but there it is. As a player, you should always do as much research as possible before you tackle any big bad critter. As a dungeon master, consider carefully before you use the Tarrasque in your game. This thing is a hungry wrecking machine. It's designed to turn continents into wastelands. It can easily destroy your entire group and then pop up a few giants or dragons as after dinner mints. This thing is nasty. Okay? Be careful how you use it as a dungeon master, and if you hear the word Tarrasque as a player and you're not 18th level, just run away. Get as far away as you can. Just go. It's your best bet. That's the Thessal Hydra. Before I get into this video, I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you about my new book, The House Off Farrago Road. It's now available on Amazon. The author is H.L. Anderson. That's me. It's just a fun story about a house where the denizens are not quite normal. Mythological creatures and supernatural forces commingle with modern-day law enforcement and the criminal underworld. If the quirky weird piques your interest, check out my new book, The House Off Farrago Road. As I said, it's available on Amazon. I hope you enjoy it. All right, here we go. The Thessal Hydra. I've been playing Advanced Dungeons & Dragons better than 45 years, and in all that time, I've run up against some very vicious and capable creatures, monsters. One of the more terrible monsters I've ever faced is the Thessal Hydra. The Thessal Hydra can be found on page 119, 119, 119 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual 2. Be sure to read through the description very, very carefully before you use it in your game. I say that with all these monsters because every monster that I talk about usually has quirks. They're not just run-of-the-mill hack and slash. Okay, so read through them very carefully. One of the most fearsome aspects of this monster is the fact that it can attack up to 10 times in each round. 10 times in each round, yes. And I'm sorry, but as a dungeon master, if you let me attack 10 times in each round, a fair amount of those are going to be critical strikes. The main mouth of this creature hits for 1d20 damage, plus another 1d20 acid damage if the victim fails a saving throw versus poison. Another nightmarish ability is that they can spit acid once per day. The victim will take 12d6 damage, half of that if they make their saving throw versus poison. And by the way, this is not a breath weapon saving throw, but a poison saving throw. And don't forget that the acid continues to do damage as long as the victim is in contact. That's what acid does. Check out my video on the Black Dragon. You'll understand what I'm talking about. All in all, a Thessal Hydra can cause major, major problems for virtually any size party up to and including 8th level characters. One of the things that I find really, really devastating about a Thessal Hydra is when it comes running out of the darkness and attacks by surprise. If it can do that, if the players wander into a cave and it just comes out of the darkness and gets them, yeah, they're screwed. Years ago, I was playing the Wizard in a group of 8 6th level characters. We were running from a large group of bandits, basically an army, and opted to hide out in a cave near a river delta. Unbeknownst to us, a Thessal Hydra was living within that cave. The monster rushed out of the shadows and spit acid directly into my wizard's face. I failed my save and I died outright. That much damage killed me outright. The thief and the cleric were standing next to me. The cleric failed his save as well, and he died. The thief made her savings throw and was incapacitated. It knocked her out. She, of course, laid there in the acid pool and died because it ate the. She's laying in acid. It continues eating her away, and she died. The remaining fighters and rangers were assaulted in melee combat, and the entire group was wiped out. It was a total party kill that took a grand total of 4 combat rounds with 1 attacking creature. That, I don't care who you are, that is devastating. Thessal Hydras can make mincemeat out of a party in record time. Be very careful how you use these in your game. They're just freaking nasty. I still hesitate running Thessal Hydras against any group that's less than 8th or 9th level, because I remember what it did to our 6th level characters, and there was 8 of us. So, you know, it was just nasty. So yeah, Thessal Hydras are nasty. Just be careful how you use them, and above and beyond all else, have fun. Frog Hemoth. Yeah, I said that right. The Frog Hemoth. Yeah, this is one of the weirder monsters. As a dungeon master, there are hundreds of different monsters that you can use in your game. Most of the time, dungeon masters tend to use orcs, ogres, trolls, dragons, giants, you know, the ordinary monsters, if there's such thing. Once in a while, you want to throw something truly mind-boggling into the mix. You want to use something big and bad enough to really challenge your players, and strange enough to make your players ask, what the fuck? Enter the Frog Hemoth. The Frog Hemoth can be found on page 67 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual 2. Be sure to read up on this monster very, very thoroughly before you put it into your game. It is a little complex, so read through it a couple of times. Excuse me. The Frog Hemoth is huge. It is 18 feet long and 10 foot wide. This thing is big. It's as big as a small dragon. It has 16 hit dice, and does incredible damage, 5 to 50 points on a bite. These critters usually hide in weight, and they try to surprise their opponents. They're huge, and they try to surprise their opponents, yeah. Victims seized with the tentacles can be bitten or chewed on, taking that 5 to 50 points of damage. Victims swallowed whole take 4 to 16 points of digestive damage every round and are unconscious after the second round. So for 2 rounds, they're taking this damage, and if they fall, and then they fall unconscious, whether their hit points are low or not, and they just lay there getting digested. It's crazy. So if a character is swallowed whole, by the time they fall unconscious, they've taken 8 to 32 points of damage. Once unconscious, they continue taking this 4 to 16 points each round. Note that victims traveling alone, I can't read my own writing. Note that victims traveling alone are much more vulnerable than one might even think. It's bad enough to travel alone in Dungeons and Dragons, but, you know, with all the monsters running around and everything. But with this thing, it's even worse. If captured by the tongue, that victim cannot attack the tongue to free themselves. That's why traveling companions are very important with this thing. The Frog Hemoth has an astounding array of defenses against normal fire and electricity. Fireballs and lightning bolts are a little more effective. Also take special note of the creature's offspring. Tad Hemoths are dangerous as well. Frog Hemoths are a little complex to run, but I guarantee your players will be thrown for a loop. This thing is a giant frog with tentacles coming out of its face. And it has the whole frog tongue thing going on too, so it can reach out and grab people. I've lost more than one character to these critters over the years, and total party kills are easy when these things are in the mix. If you... Excuse me, one moment. It's amazing. Coffee makes everything better.
If you have players who use teamwork well and cover each other, a froghemoth is not going to be as devastating. But if you have a team or a group rather, not a team, but a group of player characters who are pretty much all out for themselves, there's a lot of infighting, there's a lot of backstabbing, stuff like that amongst the group. Yeah, a froghemoth will get a TPK pretty freaking quick. That's all I'm saying. These things are nasty.
The Manticore. Now, I've been running AD&D since 1979, and Manticores are one of my favorite monsters to run against low to mid-level groups of player characters. Manticores can be found on page 65 of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual. Be sure to read up on these monsters very thoroughly before you run them in your game. They're not real tricky, but they are very useful. Manticores are of low intelligence and make excellent guardians or servants. They can be set to guard a structure to protect whatever's within, as long as they have a warm, dark place to reside within. As servants, they are large enough to be ridden, smart enough to be sent on errands, and powerful enough to make a statement. Manticores prefer to feed on men, so remote settlements and small villages are excellent feeding grounds. In combat, Manticores prefer to start with volleys of tail spikes, following up with melee combat of claw bite. What I like about Manticores is they can fly, and they're fairly fast, so strafing runs become a real possibility with these things. One Manticore can give a group of 4 to 6 low-level characters, second, third level, a good fight. Low-level characters will need a good plan and a bit of luck to defeat one. 2 to 4 Manticores can challenge a light group of 4 to 8 level player characters. Now, years ago, I was running a group of 5 players with 4th level characters. They were searching for an evil wizard. The wizard resided in an old set of ruins outside a remote village. The group tracked him down and found the ruins. Cool. Everybody was like, "Yeah, we got to figure out how to defeat these, or how to get in there and get this guy." The wizard had taken 3 Manticores as servants. He was riding one off, tracking down an artifact that he needed for his plans. The other 2 Manticores saw the 5 player characters approaching. 2 of the players were elves, and the rest were humans. The Manticores took to the air and began strafing runs with volleys of their tail spikes. The group fled into the ruins for cover. That was a good thing that they did. The Manticores couldn't fire volleys of spikes anymore, so they landed to pursue them. In the narrow confines of the corridor, the player characters were able to divide the beasts and concentrate all of their attacks on one at a time. The first critter fell fairly easily, the second one was caught in a courtyard, and after sustaining considerable damage, it flew into the air, it jumped into the air and flew away. It ran away, basically. And because it's not like they were, the guy wasn't magically controlling them, he just offered them, I'll feed you if you stay, basically, and they said, "Okay, great. You work for me, and I'll give you this and that." And they said, "Okay." Well, they figured that this last one figured that the pay wasn't worth it, so he flew away. Proper planning and a bit of luck helped this group defeat these 2 Manticores. A lot of times, player characters don't think in terms like that. They're more of the hack and slash variety, so they would rather. A lot of times, you get players that will just stand and fight. Well, with the Manticores doing strafing runs like that, standing out there and fighting was not a good thing. They would have died because they couldn't hit these things. It's one thing to hit a critter with a bow. Melee weapons were out. It's one thing to hit a critter with a bow. It's another thing to try to hit a critter that's flying through the air and knows enough to dodge. These things are not unintelligent. They're not animals. They're of low intelligence, which means they're not bright. They're not geniuses, but they're not stupid. Okay? So they knew enough to dodge. They know what a bow is. They know what arrows do. So strafing runs were an intelligent way to attack things on the ground. That being said, the players had to find a way to limit that mobility and to get them down where they could hit them. The only way to do that was to run into the ruins and keep them hemmed in. Confine them in an area where they can't maneuver. Once that happened, they were pretty easy to pick off. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, a bit of luck and some planning, and you're okay. I like mana cores because they're not overpowered, but they're damned useful, especially for a dungeon master.